Welcome, everyone. I hope that you are all having a fantastic first day here at Business Travel Show Asia Pacific. I'd like to welcome you to our panel session, Air Supply and Strategy, Making Smarter APAC Air Program Choices. My name is Jen Bankard. I'm the Executive Director of Conference Content and Strategy with the BTN Group, and I'm going to cover just a few brief housekeeping remarks before I introduce your moderator for the session. Perhaps you've seen this already today, but I am pleased to share that this year we are offering live captioning for all of the sessions, not just in English, but in 7 other languages. So if that is useful to you, you can access that via the event app. And of course, we would love your feedback at the end of the session. So if you have not already added this session to your conference schedule, if you could please add that now. And then once the session concludes, you will get a prompt to give us your feedback. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Kenji So. Kenji is the founder and principal consultant with Solutions, and many of you may know him. He has a robust history in the business travel industry. So Kenji, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. Got to put on your earphones. I got to wait for you, Bobby. All right. I hope you've had your afternoon lunch and a coffee and tea, because I need you awake for the next 45 minutes. And to round things up and to really make it energizing for you, we're going to start with a few questions and to get your bodies moving. So can you all please stand up, please? Can I ask all of you to stand up? Joanne, don't look at me like that. Okay, good. I'm going to ask everybody 2 questions, and then we're going to see who's the last one standing. The first question: if air is your biggest spend or your client's biggest spend, please remain standing. Okay, we've got somebody who sat down. Great. Second, if you feel that you're already an expert in Asia Air, or your Asia Air program is entirely under control, please remain standing. Okay, Billion was almost there, so I was going to buy her coffee, but she didn't want to. But I think what I'm trying to get here is that we've got the right audience, right? And most importantly, I want to then introduce myself very quickly. My name is Kenji. I run Solutions Advisory. I've sat on both sides of the table. I used to run travel programs for Goldman Sachs and Bain. I used to also be the GM at FCM Travel, one of the best, if not the best, TMC. One of the best, if not the best. No. And when Jen asked me to run this session, I said, I don't know. And so we're going to have 3 very, very strong experts that's going to come on stage with us. But before we invite them up, I'd like to plant a question in your head. If there is one thing that you can change in your Asia Air program today, what would that be? Hold that thought. You don't have to turn around and tell them, because everyone else cannot hear you. You can only hear and listen to us. And now I'd like you to join me in welcoming our very esteemed panelists. We've got Floyd Pecabera, a very seasoned travel manager from Western Digital. And we have also got Vibhav Singh, a very established consultant in the industry who has really seen across the client mix. And to round it up, we have got a senior leader from the technological platform that really connects everything up for you to be able to consume, Renaud Nicole from Amadeus. So before we start it all, I did ask each one of them to tell me one interesting fact about themselves that even the other panelists didn't know. So we'll start with that. First, I didn't know that, Floyd, you are such a you are such a sports person. You run triathlons, you play badminton, you go bowling, and I was telling Jen she needs to start running with you. And Vibhav accidentally got into the travel industry, accidentally got into Singapore, but I can assure you he didn't accidentally get on stage. And lastly, Renaud, he fell in love with travel after living in Mexico when he first graduated from university. and he knows a lot about travel, including for Southeast Asia, South America, in case BTN wants to have the next event there. All right? So that's the personalization part of it now. Good. So we're gonna start off, with a bit of a activity for all of you. Earlier on our word cloud, we asked you, what do you think is one word that describes Asia Air? The biggest thing that came up was complex. Now, I'd like to ask and poll everyone here, do you find that your Asia Air program is genuinely different from the rest of the world, or perhaps more similar? Oh no, we got a tie. All right, countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, 65% has answered that it's now 67. Who is sitting on the fence? All right, 64% of you say that it's rather different from the rest of the world. 36% of you feels that it's pretty much the same. So perhaps I should ask the seasoned travel manager here, Floyd, do you feel that this is the same game with different players, or do you fundamentally want rethink your approach here in Asia?
So, wow, that's a good data. So, I would say that our program is similar to the majority of us here in the room today. So I think that Asia requires a lot of, or fundamentally requires, you know, more different approach in several areas. So while the objective remains the same as a global one, right? So Asia requires differentiated approach because of market fragmentation, supplier ecosystems, and culturally, uh, culturally, how do you call this, driven traveler behaviors. So we often see in our program that are um, higher higher reliance in offline bookings, low adoption of our global tools, as well as the complexity of the Asian carriers or the LCCs that gives us challenge because it sits outside of the GDS or outside of our channels. So we've also changed our strategy from switching our contracts instead of global contracts to a local or regionalized contracting with our air partners. So in short, the strategy remains global, but the operating model in Asia has to be more adaptive, more localized, and pragmatic.
So it almost feels like there is a huge operating model, but it has to be segmentized into the various locations that
Right.
you operate in, and you are able to then make sure there's air contracts and the air management side of things fulfill the right needs of your local
Yes.
Individuals.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
especially
very
us
strong.
because we have a strong presence in Asia, Malaysia, India, Thailand, wherein most Asian countries are huge in these regions.
Good to know. Viva, from your point of view, where you cut across a lot more clients, what do you think when we talk about that global methodology or global framework? What is one thing that you think there's the biggest gap between how companies think Asia Air works and how it actually works? What is the one gap that comes to mind?
Um, yeah, I mean, as Flor mentioned, we we have a lot more LCCs in the airspace in Asia, right? So almost 35% of carriers in Asia by their capacity are LCCs, and then there are the problems of last mile connectivity as well, right? um, on many routes you will find both a full service carrier and a low cost carrier competing, and often you will have the LCC which has a better price, better network, and better schedule as well, better frequency too. So it's very important to take that into account. The other thing is, whenever sourcing is being done globally, there is a different threshold that they are operating at, right? So their threshold for sourcing a global deal may be very different. And what may be important for a local APAC stakeholder, which is, for example, a high frequency route like Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, or Singapore, Hong Kong, may not be as big for a global sourcing person who is sitting in UK or US, for example. So it is important to have that contract coverage in those smaller pockets of spend, which may be small for a global sourcing lead, but equally important for Asia Pacific
Small in comparison, but significant
in
in itself.
itself.
Right?
Yeah.
The subjectivity of it and the objectivity of it. We talk about the gaps that you see in your global companies and how they see Asia. If I could stay with you, Vibhav, what is a common misconception that you keep having to correct for your clients or for your client's organization when they approach Asia Air?
I think one common misconception is if for an airline you do not cut their global threshold, then there is no point in sourcing that airline. However, airlines do have a mechanism for local contracting as well. And we have examples of clients who, for example, they have 3 local contracts with Singapore Airlines in 3 different countries, right? For example. So there could be examples where you can have multiple local contracts. Of course, it means more administrative work, but then it gives you an good contractual coverage or discount coverage in parts of your spend.
That's a very interesting point that we honestly I did not hear of their answers, and I thought that was a very refreshing point in that it doesn't mean that a bigger size always gets you the better deal. I think in the air industry, particularly for what you're trying to point out, the complexity of it and the localization of it really means that as a buyer, it might be useful to look at what are different options to be able to maximize that output at the end of the day for that long-term mutual relationship. And I think that's really refreshing. Thank you. If I could go back to Floyd and before I round it up with Renaud, what do you think is one thing about Asia that your global framework could not account for?
So if I have to pick one, I think that would be market fragmentation. So our global framework assumes certain level of standardization, whether it's supplier capability, content availability, or even the traveler behavior. So in Asia, that assumption doesn't always works well. So we have to highly consider or highly advanced markets like Singapore or Japan, but we always consider those other countries in Asia wherein there are lots of Asian carriers or LCCs. So sometimes we need also to consider or because that impacts the duty of care because it's booked outside of our platform. So we need to consider that as well. We need to rethink how we balance the policy enforcement without, with practicality. So in short, for us, the biggest learning for us from one size fits all to a more adaptive framework, localization, or very pragmatic.
Thank you. That's really useful. I'm learning as I moderate this entire session. And what I think I can hear from Vibhav and Floyd yourself is really in the industry, particularly in Asia here, I heard so many times the major carriers and the LCCs. We heard so many times of the fragmentation of Asia. We also heard so many times around them competing on distribution and so forth, which really comes to that final question in terms of how Renaud can really round it up. Do you, from your point of view in Amadeus, does the data, does the insights really feels like Asia is structurally different? Or perhaps same principles with rather different nuances? So nuances equals it's actually same but just different shades, or that it's really structurally different?
No, I think I will echo what my fellow panelists said, that the principles are the same. Airlines, they want more control on their distribution. They want to be able to personalize better, to retail better their products. TMCs, they are looking for integrated workflows, automation, end-to-end servicing. And trial managers, they want control of cost, they want duty of care, they want to have reliability of data. So from that point of view, it's very similar to the rest of the world. But then the reality of Asia is different because it's very fragmented. We talked about the fragmentation in terms of content because of the strength of low-cost carriers in many markets in the region, such as India, for instance, but there are others. There's also fragmentation in terms of the content aggregation that you can use as a TMC. China being the largest market, they run on a different system, that's Travel Sky. So again, that requires some adaptation to bring your travel program into China. And also there are a lot of differences in the way that travelers consume travel as business travelers, with very high mobile self-service adoption in some markets and a lot more assisted bookings in other markets. So all of that together means that yes, the principles are the same, but the execution is more complex because there's so much diversity to cater for.
And I thought your last sentence was really insightful for me and hopefully for everyone. The principles are the same, but the execution is so much more complex and perhaps at a slightly different tier from perhaps what the other regions are, mainly because the content and the distribution are so much more fragmented. And I think that's the main takeaway that I can see from this first act. And to the 68% that felt like it's rather different, it seems like it's validated. And to the 32%, we can bring this up as an after session conversation, as a debate perhaps. But thank you, and I think this first act really tells us that in a way, Asia is unique enough to matter. And most importantly, the market is actually reminding us right now, because if we are to look at what's happening in the Middle East and with the crisis that's happening around the world, your routes are getting impacted. Your duty of care is something that you have to think about every day, every night. Maybe some of you can't even sleep for a few weeks. You are having to think about what's going to happen to some of your networks, because the airlines are going to have to redeploy their planes to maximize their revenue. Their planes cannot be sitting on a tarmac, cannot be sitting in a dangerous location. How are your travelers going to travel to continue to be competitive? And with that, I'd like to go to the next slide on real world impact. Which of these impacts from the crisis is most pressing for your program right now or your client's program? Can everyone access it? Okay, good. We got one person. We're just going to give it 16 more seconds. I can see the clock counting down now. I think we have a resounding answer. I came up with these options thinking that maybe it's going to be quite even. But from what we are seeing here, your number one impact right now is the rising airfare and the resultant cost to your organizations. Perhaps then I'll bring it to Floy yourself. As you know, all the travel managers here, you are looked to as a travel expert in your organization. I think the two key questions you get asked by your C-suites right now is, how can I keep my people safe? How can I make sure that my cost is kept relevant? And perhaps the third one is, how can we continue to be competitive? What do you see in Western digital right now, Floy?
So I'm surprised. Well, actually, that's good to hear. That's good to see this result that majority of us here are very strict in regards of the duty of care. So that's us as well. So one of the questions from our ELT actually during the crisis happened is, are we monitoring our employees? How can we make sure that our employees are safe with the situations? Because it was like a sudden, sudden crisis that has immediate escalation. So we had really a very strong and disciplined duty of care in our program, wherein we make sure that our employees are having the duty of care mobile app. So we are not in our policy. We are not allowing them to travel if they do not have the mobile app, because that's our very first tool that we are rely to our employees where they are exactly. So that's very important. So when this crisis happened, we were able to monitor them even if they're going to the airport or to the hotel. We know where they're exactly. So that's where we did a lot of. We had a strong partnership with our duty of care and our security. So we immediately get out of our employees from the Middle East. And some of those employees that were on transit, we immediately evacuated them and rerouted their itineraries to outside of the Middle East. So that's very important for us. The that was one of the highlights that we are very proud to report to our executives.
Very good. And I think I have to agree. I mean, if there's no duty of care, none of your employee, none of your travelers will feel safe. And when they don't feel safe, they cannot perform. And when they cannot perform, your entire productivity and competitivity gets hit. And so, that's really good. Vibhav, if I can follow up on this point here, 76% of the respondent has mentioned that the biggest impact here is rising airfare and costs. In your experience across your client, how does the fare and route impacts have come about for them? What are realistic alternatives to how the crisis zone has been for everyone?
Well, so rising airfare is something which is not surprising, right? As and when the oil supply was restricted due to whatever is happening in the Gulf, we saw jet aviation fuel increasing to a large degree. Um, it's a bit different because we were comparing it with the Ukraine war and trying to see if it's the same kind of an increase, and then it's slowly fuel will find a different route to go to the right airports. But it's much more impacted this time because, for example, the crack spread, which is the difference between the increase in the crude oil and the increase in jet aviation fuel, that crack spread is much wider this time. That means jet aviation fuel is almost more than double what it was before this Middle East conflict began. Now that means airlines will definitely pass on this extra cost to the travel buyers. And jet aviation fuel is almost, someone was saying this morning, it's almost 40% of airlines operating cost. So it's inevitable that airfare will go up. What is happening right now is fare is going up in three different ways. Your base fare is going up, right? Low capacity, high demand. Your except in some routings, your base fare is stable. Fuel surcharge has been increased, which we now call as carrier imposed surcharges. And lastly, interestingly, baggage fee has gone up. So almost entire world has increased their baggage fee on most of the carriers. So there is a bit of a cost impact, even though all the things which are happening now in the Middle East conflict are looking positive. We have a temporary ceasefire, right? It feels like the impact will go on for at least 3-4 months. So as travel buyers, we should be sensitizing our internal stakeholders that look, something is happening, you need to revise your travel budget because it's not going to go away that soon, right? To the second point around alternatives, right? See, there is no alternative sometimes to airline, right? We cannot cross the Atlantic on a train, right? We cannot take a rental car and drive all the way to US or to Europe. Um, but the alternatives have emerged in terms of routing, right? So the flights are not crossing the Gulf airspace. They're either going through the northern corridor, which is your Central Asia, Turkey, or taking the southern corridor, which is your south of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and flying bypassing this Gulf airspace. And that's where you may have opportunities. You may look at other airlines and other content which is being provided by your TMC's marketplace to look for better alternatives, right? Um, I would say it also depends on where you are flying to. So, for example, if you look at, for example, Europe to Asia or Europe to Australia, the new transit points are no longer Dubai, Doha. They are usually Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, Singapore. If you look at India to North America, they are stopping over in Egypt, they are stopping over in Turkey. So different alternatives are emerging, and some airlines are happy, right? So there has been some airlines who had to cancel their flights because they just don't have enough jet aviation fuel to fly, right? So, but there are some airlines who are properly hedged, they are prepared for the crisis, and therefore still maintaining their schedule as much as they can.
Thank you. That's really insightful because I think we talk about not just what is happening, but how it's happening and why it's happening. And in my past life, I used to hedge fuel for Singapore Airlines. So this becomes even more real and personal in terms of how much this 40% really jacks up if you don't have a very strong hedging plan, which I think now with the crisis, more people are finding out of what are different airline strategy. As they go through contracting, this might be something that's food for thought for the next few years. We talk about duty of care, we talk about rising airfares and cost impact. Renaud, from a distribution, from an aggregator standpoint, from a tech standpoint, what has this crisis revealed about how well technology supports buyer in disruption? Has there been any great outcomes from there, or are there also gaps that we saw?
I don't think this crisis is much different to other crises that we had for different reasons in the way that it impacts corporate travel and the overall industry. It's still the same where if you don't have the basis right, you're going to be in a world of pain. So if travelers book outside of the program, it's going to be much, much more complicated to assist them during these times. If your program is relying on siloed system where the booking tool doesn't talk to the alert system and doesn't talk to the system you use to send alerts to the traveler, you can be sure that something can break down in this time of heightened stress. So in that sense, I think it just confirms that you need to get the fundamentals right to be in a better place to manage those events. And then in terms of managing the disruption for the travelers, GDSCs have evolved the products that they give to the TMCs to manage involuntary changes that are pushed by the airlines. But there's still a lot of room to increase the scale at which it can be processed, because there's a big difference between having one flight disrupted to a whole region. And that's where now we are looking at how we can apply AI, agentic AI, in assisting TMCs, travel consultants, to accelerate the triage of bookings that are disrupted, to prioritize the ones that need to be attended first, to scan through the eligibility rules and the waiver rules of providing alternative option, come up with reshopping options, and then ultimately help the consultants to make faster decision to assist those travelers. So this is where we are working on that this year to help disruption management for the TMCs, applying AI to manage those events, those bigger scale events.
So we talk about disruptions, cancellations, and how it flows through to the TMC, and how the tech platform can support the consultants in the sort of the last mile in making sure that the booker or the traveler gets the right information. During such a huge crisis or event, there's always also a lot of changes. How have we seen, at least in the recent episode, airlines communicating changes clearly through the distribution? Do you see that happening pretty much ideally already, or do you feel that there's still a gap that can be filled?
No, there's room for improvement for sure, and it's not because the airlines are doing a bad job at it. Is because the airlines still rely on legacy system and technology. that for a big part we provide, but they are based on all standards, no? Where we still with the PNR, EMDs, tickets. Some of the systems are not necessarily integrated between the reservation system and the departure control system. So when you have these events few hours before departure, that's where there's still there's a lot of room for improvement. And IATA has come up with their offer and order standards, and especially on the other part is to modernize the infrastructure of the airlines to adopt retailing standards and really having a single source of truth when it comes to a trip, which means that it's much easier to have access to the same information across all the system, but also across the stakeholders in the industry. It's easier to trace from the order what changes have been made or proposed. It's better to reduce the disruption after the disruption is handled, because today maybe you change the ticket, but all the ancillaries that were booked with the ticket initially, they are lost. So you need to manage the disruption a second time. So for all of that, there's a lot of improvement ahead. And as Amadeus, we have come up with our new generation airline system called Nevio, which is really embracing those standards, and we're already working with our launch customers. And one of the big value will be on the disruption management.
Thank you. That's really insightful, almost giving us a behind view of what Amadeus is doing in the industry. I think two key things stood out for me. One is, if there's any airlines sitting in the audience today, modernize earlier and faster. If there are travel managers here, as I can see many of you are here, you can tell your C-suites that everybody should book in the program, without which you can't manage their changes, you cannot manage their cancellations, you do not have enough duty of care, right? And I think across its entire thing, rising airfare cost impact is the resultant of it. What has come in between that everybody has experienced is the lack of flexibility in terms of making sure that you can get the right option to the right people at the right time and really make sure that your travel program is efficient. Which brings us to the next point. One of the key things that has come up in the industry for a few years now, talking about flexibility, better content, customized content, and also faring, has been NDC. And I saw some faces, emotions or feedback in the audience. There has been a bit of an AI fatigue, so I tried not to put in any AI thing here, but I feel like we should still talk a little bit about NDC. So first, we have a little bit of a poll here. NDC has been talked about for quite a while. We definitely have seen it come to a very good level in the past 1 or 2 years, but has it really reached its full potential? We are here in Asia. Asia parents demand the world of their kids. If you're an Asian parent, has NDC delivered to its full potential? Or do you think that there is something that matters most to you right now that you want to vote for? Better fare saving is still up there. I'm gonna give everybody 10 more seconds to vote. Okay, any last stragglers? Are you gonna vote? Are you taking a picture of me? She's gonna vote, I think. Is she voting? You voted? Okay. All right, so the crowd has spoken. 43% of you. Wait, don't change it. I need to talk. All right, so full potential. What matters most to you right now? I think 40% of the room wants better fare savings. 26 or 30% of you wants easier changes and cancellation. And then the third, people wants visibility into their travel program data, because with more customization, there are more data points. With more data points, you can understand your program better. With more information, you can construct the next future. But I think then also it says that the content personalization and better accountability when things goes wrong are not as, at least in this crowd here, not as important. If I can bring it to Renault in terms of changes and cancellation, there has been the urban legend that NDC tickets are harder to change. TMC, airlines point to each other sometimes as to who owns this booking. Now, what do you see in the industry right now? What progress has been made? And in the same light of the questions I've asked, is there anything more that we can do in the industry to reach its full potential?
Sure. So NDC has been a long journey already for the industry.
Very long.
And especially on the corporate side of the business, it's been a long maturation process, but I would say we've come a long way in enabling adoption at scale. When we look back at like the progress that has been made over the last few years, the standards themselves have evolved a lot to cater for a lot more of the servicing use cases, which were not even defined initially by the airlines. So there has been a great deal of collaboration in the industry between airlines, aggregators, travel sellers, to really make sure that the standard is comprehensive enough to support the use cases, especially coming from the TMCs that usually manage the most post-servicing activities compared to leisure agencies. Then airlines on their side, but also aggregators, they had to upgrade the standards that they were supporting, the use cases that they were covering with their technology partners as aggregators, Amadeus and others. Also, we had to do a lot of effort on normalizing all the servicing use cases because the way that it was implemented by different airlines was vastly different. So to make sense of all of that complexity and expose it to travel sellers also required a lot of investment. And then in the corporate environment, it's not only making the content available in the booking tool. That in itself is already an endeavor, but that it needs to be properly reported. It needs to feed into the duty of care system, and so on and so forth. So that's why it took longer than other segments of the market, but now we are seeing adoption at scale. Our NDC TMC bookings, if we compare year on year, they are growing by a factor of 3, and now 20% of all our NDC bookings globally on Amadeus are coming from online booking tools, corporate online booking tools.
That's great.
So it really shows that adoption is there, it's happening, and the solution is mature enough to scale. I wouldn't say that 100% of the use cases are covered yet. We still need to work some corner cases like Interline or Codeshare, but it's more than good enough to start and already make some strong headways.
Great, and I think for perhaps on a travel buyer side, sometimes you may not exactly see some of these insights. And the key things that I got out from there, one thing we never really related NDC to one word that we never really related NDC to in the past many years was scale. And that came up in a few instances in that we probably are past the rather tough stages of really aggregating things together, getting the right parties to really see what that future looks like. And that scale did come up, in my view, something really positive. Second is that I think when you talk about TMC booking growing at a 3x time, that is probably something that we have not seen in the past. So I think those are really optimistic key points that I would take out from what Renaud has just shared. If I could pass it on to Vibhav, since you advise so many clients, for the clients that have been benefiting from NDC, what are they doing differently, or what are they doing that that really is turning the needle, and what does good adoption look like?
So maybe I'll start with the second question first,
Sure.
right? So what we are seeing on our side is, so in APAC, the NDC is still a bit at a nascent stage, right? But in US and Europe, where NDC bookings are being made, we made almost 1 million tickets on NDC in 2024 when we just started. We are seeing a 20 to 40% adoption that varies by airline and point of sale countries, right? And mostly we are seeing NDC adoption in domestic segments, domestic sectors. Maybe there is a reason for that. Maybe the NDC fare was best fare of the day at that point of time, and the domestic fare classes have relatively less, despite being very restricted, they have relatively less change fee or cancellation fee. So good adoption for any travel program today will look like 20 to 40% of NDC content usage. Edifact is still being used at the same time. What clients are doing differently is, firstly, they are making sure that their internal stakeholders are aligned to book within the authorized channel. It's very important because many a times when they are booking directly with the airlines through just to get the NDC content, the serviceability issues come up, right? Then there is a long queue for them to get any changes done in the direct airline tickets or any cancellation done. And all of those are taken care of when everything is routed through one authorized channel. So that's very important. The next big piece is being open to all kind of content. So many travel managers are still sitting on the sideline whether we should allow NDC content to come in or not, right? There are some apprehensions. I would say the good clients who have really benefited from NDC are already allowing that adoption to happen. Other than that, I would say there are two main things that are the characteristic of NDC. One is personalization, fare bundling or fare packaging, which means your base fare is going to include as a bundle some ancillary products, right? So it's very important that you look at those ancillary products, priority boarding or whatnot, more leg space, lounge access, see what your policy says about it. And if your policy is silent, have something about it, right? Whether those ancillaries are reimbursable or not. Second thing is the continuous pricing piece, right? In NDCs, you can have price points between the different fare ladders. So one has to be ready for that. If you do not, like what we have seen is clients which have a lengthy pre-trip approval process, they are not making the full benefits of NDC. So do away with lengthy approval as much as possible, automate those approvals as well. So yeah, apart from that, from a sourcing perspective, usually airlines, because they want to increase the NDC adoption, they are giving a few discounts, additional discounts, few points additional on top of traditional discounts. But make sure you're doing the analysis properly because the baseline could be different for NDC and the Edifact. So yeah, I think these are things which clients are doing differently.
It's very useful. I'm learning myself. 20 to 40% been the right number. Policy should catch up with NDC, reduce long approvals in order for it to really come true.
Yeah, 20 to 40 can ramp up because right now
As
it's
a
a
start,
mix.
as a
Yeah,
start.
that's the starting point. Yeah.
Clear. Thank you. And Floyd, from your angle, what is a dream NDC state from a buyer and program angle? Cost, risk management, reporting, easier process, as we have seen here. From your point of view, what do you see as the dream state that you would like to see? Maybe there are airlines here that's going to listen.
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes they listen, sometimes.
Yeah, so for me, dream NDC dream state for me is something that no disruption to the travelers and seamless for the program. So from the buyer's perspective, it is not just about better pricing, but of course, it's also very important. But for me, I believe it's about full parity across all channels. And that means having access to the same content across all channels. So, in short, Dream NDC for me is more about full content parity, content visibility, as well as standardized data and seamless integration to the program.
So you just helped me with my question to Renaud because those are what what a travel manager wants in a dream state of NDC. From the technology platform that can connect everything up and really get the right parties involved, where do you see us now and the dream state?
Look, let me again put in context why NDC was created in the first place. NDC is an upgrade of the pipe that is connecting the airlines to the outside world, to the distribution channels. But the real value of NDC comes when not you've upgraded the pipe, but you've upgraded the engine that is creating the offers on the airline side. And again, I spoke about modernizing the offer infrastructure on the airline side. The other part is to modernize the offer creation, which relates to dynamic pricing, as Vibhav was saying, and really helps airlines make the full catalog of their products to the distribution channels, ancillaries, bundles, and be able to define with a given corporation the rules of eligibility or policies for this catalog of services. So it's first having access to a richer product inventory. Two is to be able to visualize better, to be able to do better comparison in the distribution channel. And third is to be able to do more personalization based on the traveler, based on the context, so that the retail promise of NDC can be fully delivered. And then I would add one more thing, and that also connects with what we said at the beginning, is the importance of LCCs in this region. NDC from a technology point of view also brings some level of convergence between how LCCs and full service carriers are distributing their content. In the past, LCCs were not so much contributing to GDSs for two reasons. One, from a technical point of view, they were operating completely differently with APIs, ticketless, etc. And two, because of the commercial model. The technical element is, for the most part, resolved, because now we are seeing LCCs wanting to distribute their content through NDC standards. So then it becomes more of a commercial discussion of low-cost carriers wanting to use NDC also to distribute their content through the GDS channel, and we are working with some players like Indigo, like Scoot, to bring their NDC product in the GDS.
Thank you. It's really useful. I am really learning a lot, and I think what I can sort of sum up from here is, one, a few years ago we probably are thinking about, is NDC a go or no go? I think where we are right now is NDC is a go. There is no go. But in order for us to see it reach its full potential, it's like what we said, the Asian parents, it takes a village to raise a kid. And we are the village. Right? Thank you for saying yes. I could see your mouth, yes. Great. I think as when we move on to the last act here, in that we have talked about the landscape. We have agreed that Asia is probably more different than similar. We have talked about the current impacts that's really real. We have talked about something that we really cannot ignore, because at some point in time, whether you are at the forefront of NDC adoption or at the back of NDC adoption, you have to know what's evolving. Now, it comes to the next point, in that how do we raise the bar together such that we can really look at what actually works, what is emerging, what are calculated bets that people are doing in the industry to push the frontier. So back to you. Raising the bar. When did you last formally benchmark your Asia Air program? Well, someone went off the block with the best answer. We need a few more answers. Okay, we got 5% asking what is benchmarking, so I do need to go and get my dictionary to give you the formal answer. Did you answer that, Kendrick? I had to call that out. Okay, we're going to give it 5 more seconds, and then we're going to have a look. Okay, last few polls. Why I came up with this portion here is because I felt that as a community, we ought to know where we are. I think often we look at it in a very objective manner as to how is our program helping our organization become leaner, become more efficient, become more competitive. But perhaps sometimes we have never quite known about, wait a minute, how often are people looking out into the market to be able to know how they are raising the bar of what they could have seen on a more objective internal level. So, well, the poll has spoken. Within the last 12 months, 4 out of 10 of you have benchmarked your air program. The funny thing though is the next percentage of 33% has never formally benchmarked your air program. So there's a good chance that your organization is very happy with it and you can carry on living with it. Or equally, there's an equal 50% chance that perhaps there's so much more potential that your air program can meet. And for the consultants out here, you might want to take a picture of this in case it helps in your business development. So with that, Vibhav, from your angle, what are the smartest buyer in Asia doing right now? What are they doing to their air program that some others are not? Can you give us something concrete that the room can take away?
Well, for once, I'll begin with benchmarking because it's very important that we benchmark our air programs correctly. Not just the WhatsApp benchmarking. I mean, there's a limit to that, right? You have so many fare classes and so many discount terms that needs to be formally benchmarked to know where the opportunities for improvement are, right? The one thing that I've noted with the smartest of the buyers in APAC is they do an ongoing program management. That means they don't just stop after sourcing a 2 or 3 year long deal with the airline. They continuously evaluate it over time. They look at different KPIs like coverage, whether the contract is covering their full spectrum of spend. Are there new business changes happening? Maybe new offices in new locations that require flying to that city and accordingly a new discount in your deal as well. So that deal coverage and contract coverage is critical to be monitored over a long period of time. Especially with the current situation, the smartest of the buyers are keeping their budget owners informed that the fares are going to increase in the next 2 3 months. Please also increase your budget as well. The other thing is um, also about treatment of ancillary products because that's becoming a very big reality with NDC soon. So that needs to be embedded in the travel policy. And if the policy is silent about it, it will lead to confusion later on. Perhaps you may want to talk to finance about how you want finance to itemize those different components that comes up in a fare bundle or fare package. So those conversations will become equally important. The smartest buyers are already thinking of it and implementing it in their organization.
Thank you, Vibhav. And for the 60% minus the 3% who doesn't know what benchmarking is, what do you think is something that you were pushed back on maybe from 3 to 5 years ago? Something that people thought was the SOP, was the norm of Asia Air Program Management from 3 to 5 years ago. What is one thing you can share with them
Um,
that you were pushed back on, that's no longer relevant? Sorry.
well, I think the hard mandates and hard policy parameters sometimes don't work in APAC because of the geography, because of the carrier, the aviation landscape. So, what really works well here is engaging with travelers, change management, education of the travelers over a long period of time. That really helps in Asia Pacific as compared to giving hard mandates.
Because Asia is complex
It is
and
it is.
fragmented, which we started off
Fragmented
with.
as well, yeah. Yeah.
Floyd, if we can pass it on to you, then what have you changed specific to Asia carriers or your Asia Air program that made a measurable difference? What has Western Digital done that you can
Yeah.
share?
So many years ago, we are strictly mandating our employees to only book through our approved booking channels, GDS or through our TMC. But it's even we do not even reimburse them if they book outside that platform. But we did a lot of surveys internally to our employees that how can we improve this, because we've seen a lot of, like in Asia, we've seen a lot of challenge on air because of the availability of commercial airlines that is in the GDS. So we talked to our people and we listened, we heard their feedback, and we created a process at the back end wherein we allowed them to book through directly to the local carriers and load the itinerary into our duty of care system. So that's the biggest thing that we've implemented in our system, in our program.
Great to know. And I
And
think
that makes our employee happy in Asia.
Happy employees, happy employers,
Yes.
happy results.
And very productive as well.
Good, and I think it goes into what Vibhav has mentioned in that in Asia, you do need to listen more to the employees and because of slightly more complex nature. Is there something that Western Digital has been watching or experimenting that could be significant, even if it's not proven yet?
I think that would be AI predictive servicing. That wherein we can anticipate disruptions and proactively rebook tickets or support our travelers even before the escalation arises.
Good to know. Thank you. Thank you. And then if I pass it to Renaud, then how do you think technology is genuinely enhancing Asia Air program? Can you give me a few real examples that could be up to the TMC level or to the client's level that really people can walk away from this session on and feel that, hey, look, maybe we could try it?
Look, in the short term, or I would say that again, NDC is ripe for adoption. So I don't think we have anyone adopting NDC 100%, but we have TMCs for a given airline that are at 70%. We have other TMCs that for 10, 20 airlines together, they are at 50%. So it's real, and there's immediate opportunity of savings. There's opportunity to have more strategic engagement with airlines on what new products they can bring to the travelers. So I would start with that because sometimes technology is developed, but the adoption lags.
Good to know. And I think if I could sum up what I'm hearing from here in terms of how do we raise the bar together is one, we all have to get involved. Two, Asia needs to listen to Asia more. Three, the technology might be already there, but are we brave enough or perhaps taking that calculated risk enough to want to take that step forward? And four, I think what we saw from the poll today that 60% has never formally benchmark your program or up to maybe 1 or 3 years ago, this is where we raise the bar together in Asia. And I think that's a really good roundup to this portion because we talk about NDC earlier, we talk about village, we are really the village. For us to be able to sit here, say in 3 years' time at the next BTN or equivalent conference, to be able to say, hey, look, if we ask ourselves these same questions again, have we genuinely progressed from today, 2026, in 2029, how has Asia Air program really moved? We all hold our responsibility to make that a yes answer. And I think, this is something I would love to sort of put it in your mind. And to round it all up, I think at the very start of this entire session, I asked you the question of what would you, if there's one thing that you can change in your Asia Air program right now, what is that? I think over the course of the past 15 minutes, we talk about the reality of Asia in terms of that it's probably a bit more different than it's similar. And that what I'm hearing is that we need to be able to localize it, yet at the same time, the global methodology and SOP should still be there, should still prevail. Second, we talk about the current impacts that we're seeing from the crisis. And I think we have a unanimous answer as to that the rising airfare and the cost that it comes with is prevalent in everyone's mind. How do you make sure as a travel manager or as a stakeholder, manager, how do you make sure those expectations are well managed? We talk about NDC scale. It is here to scale. It is not here to be further developed. Of course, there is still a lot more development to be there, but the critical phase has passed. And lastly, I think this answer speaks for itself. If maybe you should show this to your C-suites that, hey, look, give us the budget next year. We're going to make your air program even better. We're going to come up with this or that outcome. And I hope today you can truly walk away in answering the questions that I've planted in your mind. If there's one thing that you can change of your air program today, I hope the three experts here have been able to help you with their insights, and I've been able to help make it a very flowy conversation. So thank you very much, Nico, Renaud, Vibhav, and Floy. And I thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Is there
everyone.
any, I don't know, I think Sorry, I thought somebody's going to ask for questions. Is there any questions on the floor before anybody leaves? You can leave. It's okay if you're if you are rushed for time. I forgot that I needed to ask for Q&As. Any question? A mic is coming to you.
This is for Flo. You mentioned that to make your travelers happy, you allow them to book outside of the official channel of booking. In regards to data, for travelers that book outside, how do you actually bring them together with your current approved channel?
That's a good question. So we have built internally a system. I was working directly with our IT to build a system to capture all the data and integrate it into our reporting structure, our reporting systems. And then we also load everything, like we just load the email that they receive from the airline. We load it into our duty of care partner, and then they automatically capture those data at the back end. So without manual intervention from our side. Thank you.
Any other question? Because I've got a question from LinkedIn when I posted it a few days ago, and I promised my friend that I'm going to ask this question. So my good friend Shafak had asked, are credit cards chargeback a good method to get your money back when your issued flights are cancelled due to force majeure, whether it's war or act of God? Perhaps, Vibha, from your point of view, looking at all the clients and understanding airline contracting, can yourself or Flo give a bit of insights to that?
Yeah, to me, it doesn't matter whether it's any kind of form of payment. So it's either credit card or charge card or your billing invoices, it will still go to you.
Yeah, I think it will depend on the airline's policy as to
Also.
what it is that they will do. Maybe they will give a refund if there is a calamity, there is a cancellation of flight, and usually those terms and conditions are there in the ticket itself, right? So
Good, and I think what I'm hearing here is that the form of payment does not matter, but the contracting in terms of your offer and acceptance matters. The caveat here is force majeure, which is often something that even insurers, yeah. So that's the last question I had on my mind from LinkedIn. Any last question from the floor before we wrap up? Thank you for the question. Kendrick, you're texting me. I need to check your question, or any last question from the floor? Otherwise, thank you very much for your time today, and thank you to my three panelists. Please join in thanking them for me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.